Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we love you, Lord, and ask for help at this time, that you help me with things that I've studied, that I can explain them in a way, Lord, that bring them to life. That those that are here would put forth the effort they need to learn, that we would give you honor and glory through effort and study. That there's just so much that you have to offer us, Lord, that it takes our effort in putting forth in your word through the power of the Holy Spirit to understand what's being said. Help us now, Lord, just to get what we can from it. For your word, and we pray, Jesus. Amen. Amen. For those that were here Wednesday, which is kind of our hands, we went back over the what? Where were we?
Acts of resurrection.
Did you say Acts? Did you just say Acts? We were in Acts? Is that your answer? So, I don't know, but you were right, we were in Acts. But, no, we were where? What city were we in?
Ephesus.
Ephesus, okay. And what was going on? We had the what going on?
The rise of the silver guild.
Very good. The silversmith guild rides. Over which god? Diana was the Roman name. What is the Greek name? Which would they would have known as the Greek name? Which I'm fine with that. That's fine, because that is the Roman name. Artemis. Very good. Artemis. And this would have been Artemis of Ephesus. Very good. She would have been the main local deity of the city. What was her animal symbol? Lawrence is the one that helped me break this down.
Dragon.
Remember? No. What was her animal symbol? In Ephesus, what was her animal symbol?
Bird.
Close. The bee. Very good. The bee. And it was because her chastity and her not touching and all that stuff and how things work that way. And Lawrence broke it down for us on the recording. Sounded very eloquent and smart, by the way, after listening to that. Very good. And we learned a lot about her and how everything goes and the Artemis Guild riots. Well, remember before then, Paul makes travel plans. And so we actually got to look at those, because those, we're going to be in Acts 20, verse 1 tonight. But these travel plans in Acts 19, verse 21 and 22 are coming to fruition. So turn to Acts 19, 21 and 22. We are not going to go to the guild riots. If you missed it, you missed it. We have broken that down in detail, and we got some good information from it. But that is in the rearview mirror now. But we do need to remember this. These travel plans in Acts 19, verse 21 through 22, because they are what's going to break down and come out to play in Acts 20, verse 1. So to start things out, Acts 19, verse 21 through 22. Just send to read that for us.
Now after these events, Paul resolved in the Spirit to pass through Macedonia and Achaia and go to Jerusalem, saying, after I have been there, I must also see Rome.
Okay, real quick. Brother Arnold asked me a while back about, did Paul go to Rome before he went to prison?
I got a question for you before we get into this.
Okay, sure.
Who is this town clerk? I mean, I didn't even realize there was a...
He's the mayor. The town clerk is the mayor. He would be the highest in the Silversmith Guild riots, the one who diffuses the situation. He would have been the highest administrative political office holder in the city. He would have been the one, if things had gone awry, the very first person Rome would have come to would have been him. Yeah, and so that's why he wants to make sure he puts it out. And that's why inevitably they listen to him, because he's the one with the most power. That's a very, very good question. Now, you also asked a question a while back. I didn't want to answer it back then, but I decided I will. And that was, does Paul go to Rome before he goes to prison? And the answer is, I don't think so. I think the first time he goes to Rome is in chains. Now, to me, that's what Acts seems to say. Now, there's a little breakdown of the people throw things out there. I think that's how it happens. Now, the question becomes, once he is in Rome in prison, does he get released, which seems to be the case? And once he does get released, possibly up to 2 years, what does he do? Does he stay in Rome or go other places? And this is where it gets debated. And this is where some people, and I'm surprised, Schnabel by far is my favorite. I read a ton of commentaries, okay? But for the first time ever, one is above, head and shoulders above the rest. And that's Schnabel, Zondervan exegetical commentary, in my opinion. And he thinks Paul goes to Spain after Rome. He thinks he makes that trip. I don't know anybody else who thinks Paul makes that trip, but he does, and I respect the guy, so we will look more at that later. So that is something you asked me about. I decided to go ahead and answer that, because it does set up to this part right here. Now, each of these travel plans that he's making here to go to Macedonia and Achaia. What are the three major cities in Macedonia? I'm going to stand here until somebody answers that question. I've said it a million times now. Two of them he writes letters to. One of them is, if you're very good, very, very, very good. Philippi is going to be your major Macedonian city when we see him doing things. When we see him in Macedonia, he's going to really have more of a home base in Philippi. What are two other Macedonian cities? One of them he writes a letter to, although it's not as welcoming to him, and the other is known for their Bible scholarship and study. So we got Philippi and two other places.
Corinth.
Corinth would be Achaia, or Greece, you can even say that. Think of Thessalonica. Okay? Yes, very good. And Berea. So Philippi, Thessalonica, and Berea are going to be your Macedonia. Now Achaia, I just said, you just said that. What is your major city in Achaia we're going to see? Corinth. And Greece is going to be connected to it as well. Okay? So that's going to be that right there. Now he plans to go to Jerusalem. What is he going to do in Jerusalem? What is his big plans at this point? Although Acts didn't mention it, all his letters do. What is he going to plan? What's he planning on doing?
He's going to finance money there.
He's taking finance, relief fund to the poor. And then it becomes a big debate. Why didn't Acts mention it? And it's possible that they don't like it when he brings it. We don't know. There's a lot of debates on that, okay? But this dominates his letters. We know that's what he's planning to do. And he sends ahead these two other guys in verse 22 to prepare the way for him to come in and do this. Go ahead and read verse 22 real quick.
And having sent into Macedonia 2 of his helpers, Timothy and Erastus, he himself stayed in Asia for a while.
Now, what did we say about Erastus that's interesting?
I cannot find it.
Erastus was from what city? He's from Corinth. What is interesting about him? It is possible we have historical inscriptions of him outside of Scripture, because he was what? He was a treasurer in Corinth. Now we got his name in Corinth, we got the treasurer with his name, and the question becomes, is this the same guy who was the treasurer? And it depends on who you ask. But it's very possible that it is. So although we got this guy one time mentioned here, we might have his name outside of Scripture. He might be on the page of an inscription in the city of Corinth right now. So that's what's cool about him. So you know who Timothy is, Paul Jr. So we all know that, okay? So anyway, now that is going to set up, and then after making these plans, he deals with these silversmith guildrights. They get put out because the mayor basically comes up and says, hey, we don't lose our rights. Rome could come on in. We're acting seditious. We can no longer be a free city. Guild to be disbanded. We'll lose power. We got a lot to lose here. And he talks some sense into the people. And the people do what? They disperse. They go home. Okay? And so at this point, nobody is charged with anything. Although it is possible, based on something that happens in Acts 20, verse 16, I think it is, where Paul avoids Ephesus. Some people think that the silversmith guild actually takes legal action against Paul and he can't return to Ephesus. We don't know, maybe, but one thing's for certain at this point, Paul knows the smart thing to do is what? Leave then. He's not getting run out of town. And he's not necessarily leaving because of the guild riots, but he's already made plans and he knows there could be repercussions from the guild riots, so he leaves before there are legal repercussions. And this is where we pick up right here in Acts 20, verse 1. So flip over to Acts 20, verse 1. Acts 20, verse 1. Read that for us, Jacinda.
After the uproar ceased, Paul sent for the disciples, and after encouraging them, he said farewell and departed for Macedonia.
After what uproar? Silversmith Guild right in Ephesus. And he calls the people together, the church at Ephesus. I got to go. I got to see when I see you. Got to go. Bye-bye. And he leaves. Now here is where a lot of other commentaries, I would say a majority, say Paul's background letters fill in some information here that become important that aren't mentioned that Luke skips over right here. Okay? I know Polhill says this, Bach says this, and some others. And that is he actually goes from Ephesus, an initial visit to Troas, then to Macedonia. And the reason why this is important, this will have some background information to his letters, is there's considerable tension going on with the church of Corinth at this point in time, okay? And what happens is, at the end of his Ephesian ministry, roughly spring of 54, within the last year, he writes the first letter to the Corinthians, okay? Letter 1. Now, the summer of AD 54, he goes and visits Corinth. It is during this visit that he seems to have a falling out with certain members. Big fight breaks out, okay? He then returns to Ephesus, and he writes what he calls later what's called the severe letter to the Corinthians with much painful writing and tears. This is a lost letter, but it's one that he himself seems to mention in 2 Corinthians 3. Read for 2 Corinthians 2. Read 2 Corinthians 2, verses 1 through 4.
For I made up my mind not to make another painful visit to you. For if I cause you pain, who is there to make me glad, but the one whom I have pained? And as I write, I did, so that when I came I might not suffer from pain from those who should have made me rejoice. For I felt sure of all of you that my joy would be the joy of you all. For I wrote to you out of much affliction and anguish of heart, and with many tears, not to cause you pain, but to let you know the abundant love that I have for you.
You might want to jot down 2 Corinthians 2, 4. And what that would be referring to is a lost letter that Paul writes to the Corinthians we no longer have. Okay? And he writes this letter because this falling out that happened while he is there, okay? And just as he writes this letter, he sends it with Titus. Who's Titus? This is one of his understudies, okay? Luke doesn't mention Titus either, but he's really big in his letters. Well, right about this time is when the silversmith guild riots break out, okay? He's made these plans. He's got tension going on with Corinth. He sent Titus to take this severe letter to Corinth, and then these guild riots break out. And so then the guild riots get over. He knows he's made these travel plans already, so he leaves Ephesus, makes an initial visit to Troas. However, just like a lot of us, when we got problems going on elsewhere, where's our mind? On the place we got problems, back in those problems, particularly when they're people we like a lot, okay? So he's emotionally torn, and although he's going to Troas to minister, he's not being very effective because his mind is on Corinth and the problems of Corinth. And he just wants to find Titus, but guess what? Titus ain't answering the phone. You know, because you know what? They didn't have phones back then. So he's got to go looking for Titus somewhere. He didn't know where to find him. And this is just breaking them apart because all I can think of is what's going on with Corinth. I can't find Titus. So instead of staying and ministering in Troas, he goes, I got to go find Titus. So he sails back over into Macedonia right before he gets into Corinth, and guess who he finds there? Titus. Okay? It is while he's in Macedonia, in Philippi, he runs into Titus, and Titus lets him know, guess what? There's good news. The church of Corinth got your severe letter. They reacted to it well. They have disciplined the offending party, and they've taken your side. Everything is good with you in the church of Corinth. This makes Paul ecstatic. He is really happy, okay? Which in turn leads him to write, you know that feeling, how this weight's finally lifted off your chest. You've been really upset about something. Well, finally, it's off his chest. He's excited about it. So then he writes 2 Corinthians, the second letter, and he sends it. And this is the background for writing the second letter that's going to set up his next visit to Corinth, which we're going to see here in Acts 20, verses 2 through 3. Read that for us.
When he had gone through those regions and had given them much encouragement, he came to Greece. There he spent 3 months, and when a plot was made against him by the Jews as he was about to set sail for Syria, he decided to return through Macedonia.
All right, now, he goes to Macedonia to Greece. Philippi, Greece is going to be, it can also be called the province of Achaia. And what do we say the main city of Achaia is? Corinth. Okay? So what he does, he goes from Philippi to Corinth, basically, because that's what Greece is here, Achaia, technically Corinth itself. And he's going to stay for 3 months. Now, this is going to be a seasonal stay. Now, there's a certain period of 3 months where you can't do boat travel. Does anybody want to guess what season that for 3 months you can't do boat travel? Winter. Very good. You cannot travel in winter. And it's much slower to travel in spring. I don't know if you said that, but it's hard to travel in spring. But the boat's docked for winter at that time period, okay? So 3 months, the boats are docked. He can't do anything. He's staying in Corinth at this point in time. It is at this point in Corinth, he writes another letter that we have to the church of Rome. Anybody want to guess what letter that is? The book of Romans. Very good. Are you seeing these letters beginning to develop right now? Okay. So it's here he writes the book of Romans, and he makes this planned trip to Spain. And like I said, that's hotly debated if it goes or not inevitably. Some say yes, some say no. But he gets the wheels really rolling with this idea to go to Spain. So he writes Romans, Spain, and he's staying with Gaius, his host, right while he's in Corinth. Well, after 3 months, he plans to leave by boat and go to Syria. Not Assyria, Syria. What is your major city in Syria? This is one of his home churches. Antioch. Okay? He wants to go to Antioch before he goes to Jerusalem to get some more money. That's what it's all about, collecting money for Jerusalem right now. He's going to know inevitably that when he goes to Jerusalem, he's going to get arrested. He's going to be persecuted. I mean, if there was a Jerusalem post office and it had your top 10 wanted list, who's number one on that wanted list? Him. And he knows it. But he also knows his past and what he used to do to Christians in Jerusalem. And that is where his master, Jesus Christ, died. And so be it, if he has to die, he's going back to Jerusalem to repay that debt he feels he owes, no matter what it cost him. And so this is on his mind heavily right now. Well, it's at this time he plans on getting on a boat and going to Antioch before going to Jerusalem, that guess what? Another plot breaks out against him. We got the Corinthian Jews again. Remember Gallio and the legal verdict that made Christianity legal at this point in time? Well, the Corinthian Jews still didn't like that. So they go, well, we couldn't do it in court. I know where we can do it. I hear Paul's getting on a boat. Let's get on that same boat. And guess what? We're on that same boat in the middle of the ocean. You know what? Ain't no one can stop us from doing our justice there. You know, we're in the middle of the ocean. And there's no legal law out there, is there? There's the law of the sea, which is what? You can swim with the fishes. That's right. Nothing. So they make this plan to get on the same boat that Paul's going to be on, and somehow they get it set up there. And keep in mind, he's also carrying a large amount of money at this point in time. So I got an idea. Let's kill Paul, take his money. And we'll do it on a boat when no one can stop us, okay? So they're getting ready. Paul's getting ready. We're going to be en route to sea. It's going to be the end of Paul's missionary journey. They're going to make money in the process. When, lo and behold, he receives inside intel of this plot. We do not know how. But as soon as he receives inside intel of this plot, he says, I'm not going by boat anywhere at this point in time. I'm kind of scared of boats at this point in time. You're going to see him kind of get scared of boats for a minute after this. And he's going to take land, a much longer trip, and he's going to go back to Macedonia. And what's the major city in Macedonia he's been staying at? Philippi. Very good. And it's going to be there, he's going to be rejoined by the we passages. Who's the we passages?
That'd be Luke.
Luke, very good. He's going to be. This is where Luke's been since Acts 16, hang out in Philippi. And he's going to celebrate Passover there. We'll see all this in a minute. But first, we get a note about his team. Remember, Paul has a team. All of these people inevitably have been converted one way or another, seemingly, through Paul and his ministry work. And so now he's got a team of missionaries. Okay? And all these missionaries are going to be called the 7 delegates. Who they exactly are is a little debated, but most believe they are going to represent each church that he's collected money to take to Jerusalem for. Okay? So all these churches are going to send a representative themselves, and they're going to go with Paul, one, to show unity, to show the Gentiles and the Jews can get along, but two, he's traveled a whole lot of money. Well, what do you mean when you travel a whole lot of money?
Protection.
Protection. A bunch of guys. So this is one of the reasons right here we need more protection. Okay? So they're going to travel together, and this group's going to go ahead of Paul to Troas at this point in time, and this is what we're going to see. Here's this group right here in verse 4 through 5.
So Pater the Berean, son of Pius, accompanied him, and of the Thessalonians, Aristarchus and Secundus, and Gaius of Derbe, and Timothy, and the Asians, Tychicus and Trophimus. They went on ahead and were waiting for us at Troas.
So you're going to have 7 different areas represented for Macedonia, Asia, and South Galatia. We start with Sopater. Anybody want to guess where he's from? That's okay. I didn't remember.
Sounds
either.
Latin.
He's from, very, very good guess. Very good guess. He's from Berea. Okay? He's from Berea, and he's probably mentioned again in Romans 16:21. Now we got Aristarchus. He is from Thessalonica. Where do we know Aristarchus from? He was with Paul during the Ephesian ordeal, and what happened to him? He was taken where?
Oh, he went to the big...
Yes, that's right. Him and Gaius
Yes.
were the 2 guys that were Paul's buddies taken to the theater that seated 20 to 24,000, and they're the ones taken up front. That's this guy.
Yes.
Aristarchus is going to be in the Christian Hall of Fame one day, if he's not already, okay? This guy's huge. He's one of the biggest guys you never heard about that's all throughout Paul's ministry, okay? Aristarchus from Thessalonica was part of the guild riots. He's a key member of Paul's ministry team. He's in Acts 27, Colossians 4, Philippians 1. He was in prison with Paul in Rome. And he was with Paul when he wrote Colossians, Colossians 4:10, and Philemon, Philemon 1:24. He is all throughout Paul's ministry. This dude's huge. Okay? Aristarchus is his name. You will see him again and again pop up. Now we got Secundus. I like his name, but he didn't do very much. Okay? Secundus is from Thessalonica. He's only mentioned here. But he is very much likely a Roman citizen based on his name implying that. Then there's Gaius or Gaius, who's from Galatia or Derbe, a common name, and because of that, there possibly could have been as many 3 Gaius or Gaiuses in Paul's ministry. You had one who was part of the silversmith guild riots, okay? The problem with that is that guy was connected to Macedonia and this one's connected to Derbe. Although I think you overcome that by saying that guy was the same guy who traveled to Macedonia. There was the Gaius who was the host, and there was possibly an unknown one. Anyway, you look at it, there's a Gaius right here, and that was a very, very, very common name at that time period. Next, number 5, we have Timothy. Who's Timothy? Paul Jr. That's Timothy Paul Jr. That's he's the biggest, one of your biggest first-time pastors there are, and he's from Galatia. Or Lystria, the main city of Lystria. Now we got Ty. I just call him that. Ty. He's his name I have the hardest time with. His name is Ty, okay? Ty, that's his name. He is from Ephesus. He's Asian, from the Asia Minor province, okay? He was also in prison, or he ministered to Paul while Paul was in Roman prison. And he was with Paul when he wrote the letter to the Ephesians and to the Colossians. And you know how when Paul would write those letters, somebody would carry those letters to the churches? Ty was the guy who carried the letters to the church of Ephesians and the church of Colossians. So the letter of Ephesians and the letter of Colossians you read today came by the hand of Ty. He's the one who took them to those churches, okay? Okay, good. Okay, now we've got, last but not least, Trophimus. He is also an Asian, and when he's an Asian, we were talking about where? Asia Minor, and what city? Ephesus. Okay? He is a Gentile believer who Paul is accused of taking in the Jerusalem temple. We see this in a little bit. Paul gets in trouble for this, and he gets ill and left behind in Miletus. We will go over that a little later. Key things to know here. Okay? This is when you read commentaries. Jamie needs to pay attention to this particularly. When you read commentaries on this, there are 2 cities not represented. And the reason why this is surprising is Paul actually instructs these 2 cities on how to give money to this fund. And we don't see anything about them involved in this right here. One city we know for a fact always gives some money. What is the most financially supportive city in Paul's ministry?
Correct.
That's one of these cities, but that's not that is one of them though, yes. There's one city, Ephesus is another one that will support him, but they're represented here. There's one other city, we've mentioned it a lot in Macedonia, that had a lot of money, and they're always giving money to Paul. Other one, Philippi, very good. And we don't see a representative from the Philippian church, okay? Very good. We don't see one from the Corinthian church, as one of you said, and we don't see one from the Philippian church. We know he talks to the Corinthian church based on 2 Corinthians 8 through 9. We know he talks to the Philippian church based on Philippians 4, 10 through 20. What is going on and what is the solution? Long story short, I'll let you know 2 things could be going on because they're involved some way. There's no way they're not. One could be they simply go by land. They're not part of this sea voyage team. And it's possible they're mentioned in Romans 16 with Lucius and Jason. That could be them. Or it's possible that Paul and Luke represent it. Why would Paul and Luke represent, one represent Corinth, one represent Philippi, and who would be who? If one of them between Paul and Luke represented Corinth and Philippi, who would they be and why would they be? Who would you guess? Where's Luke been?
Luke has been in Philippi.
Very good. So therefore he would naturally represent Philippi. Where has Paul just been for 3 months? Corinth. Okay, so naturally he could represent Corinth. And so that could be your situation there as well. Either they're going to travel by land later and meet them, or simply they're represented one by Paul, one by Luke, and that's how they're represented. One way or another, they are represented, put it that way, because they're too big financially. Now we've got verses 5 through 6, another travel notice. Go ahead and read that.
These went on ahead and were waiting for us at Troas, but we sailed away from Philippi after the days of unleavened bread, and in 5 days we came to them at Troas, where we stayed for 7 days.
So this tells how the 7 representatives sailed from Corinth across the Aegean Sea to Troas, and they're going to wait for Paul to arrive. Now, verse 6, we have the what? But who sailed?
We,
But we sailed. Who's we right there?
Paul and Luke.
Very, very good. That's Paul and Luke and some others. That they're gonna sail away from Philippi later. First, here's what they're going to do, though. Okay, they are actually first going to travel overland from Corinth to Philippi, 450 miles. Anybody want to guess how long that took back then?
Ooh, good Lord.
5 weeks. Very good. Non-stop 5 weeks. Okay, they're going to travel for 5 weeks from Corinth to Philippi, 450 miles. From Philippi, they're going to take the nearby seaport of Neapolis. We've seen that back in Acts 16, okay? From Neapolis, they are going to sail to Troas. Remember, that's right here, and they're going to move right there, so they're going to be really close to that point. But first, they're going to celebrate the Feast of Unleavened Bread, a.k.a. what else is this called? Passover. Very good. So that shows you could still be Jewish if you wanted to. I mean, they still did. I know Christians are still, you're allowed to, you just can't impose it, put it that way. You know, put it with the background there.
They did that so the Jews would feel accepted and feel like the Gentiles were included.
That's exactly why they did it, in my opinion. That's exactly what I think as well. There are some that think that Paul never broke with his Jewish background, but I think he did it to minister as a witness, is what I think, to make them feel comfortable and let them know we are not breaking from Judaism or Old Testament, we are fulfilling it. So we are perfectly allowed to celebrate it, but we do it through the lenses of Jesus Christ. And that's exactly why I think he did it. Others come and say he's saying more Jewish. I don't think so. But we're on the same page there. This is going to give Paul, now he just took 5 weeks, but he's going to have to really boogie here because he's going to want to make it from Philippi to Jerusalem. And he's only going to have 5 weeks to do it because he wants to get to Jerusalem by Pentecost based on Acts 20:16. Okay? So he doesn't have time to waste any time, but he's going to have to make a few stops. Okay, then it says in 5 days we came to Troas. That means it took 5 days to get from Neapolis to Troas. Last time we saw that journey, it took about a day and a half, a day, or almost 2 days. Why does it take 5 days to make that journey now?
He got to stop and talk to somebody. He got to
That's a good guess. And that actually comes up later while he's doing some other things. Think of the seasonal change right now. Last time, we were in the season where we're sailing with the
was
wind.
going the opposite
Now we're in the
direction.
spring, yes, and we're sailing against the wind. Know one of those songs you used to like, Steve, Against the Wind? I'm not sure. There's no songs like that. Now he's sailing against the wind right here, okay? And this is going to take him 5 days because of the time period he's doing it in. Then he's going to get into Troas, and this is where the boat is going to stop in schedule, okay? He's going to make the most of it, though. Because if we're going to stop in schedule, and we're stopped somewhere 7 days, what are we going to do? We're going to go witness. And so this is right. So he doesn't probably really want to stay there, but due to the boat's schedule, he's going to have to stay there, but he ain't wasting no time, which sets us up for this next part right here. If I'm going to be in a place, we're going to talk about some theology, is what he says. And this is what we have happening in verse 7 through 8. Read that for us.
On the first day of the week, when we were gathered together to break bread, Paul talked with them, intending to depart on the next day. And he prolonged his speech until midnight. There were many lamps in the upper room where we were gathered.
I want you to read that again. He prolonged his speech until when?
Midnight.
Now, who wants to complain about how long I take? That's all I want to say on that, guys. No, it's right here. There's a reason for that, by the way. It's not hold them hostage. Thank you very much. See here. This is the first day of the week right here. This actually, okay. Technically, this could be Saturday or this could be Sunday. Most opt for Sunday. I think it's Sunday, but we can't go see this proves it right here. I think it is Sunday, but it really could be Saturday, and we can't make a big argument. But I think it's a regular Sunday service, and they're meeting at night. I want you to know something. They did not meet in the a.m. They didn't have that 2 Sunday service thing going on here. And the reason why do they meet at night and not in the morning? Why couldn't you meet in the morning?
Well, probably at school or something.
That's one thing, and that's one thing we're getting there. Work. Now, how many days a week do slaves get off?
None.
Yeah, thank you. What about artisans, guys who work with their hands? None. You didn't get days off, or you didn't get paid, and so they didn't have days off. So the only time to meet, particularly since we had a lot of slaves convert to Christianity, so everybody could come, is going to be when? At night. Okay? So this is based on the work schedule. This is the one time they would have met. This would have been probably their normal Sunday worship service, at least in my opinion. They're going to bring lamps, and Paul's going to teach until midnight. The reason why Paul is teaching so long is not because they had some good old gospel singing that went on all night long. It's because he's got to leave tomorrow, and he's got a lot to say. Okay? If this is my last night here, and I got a lot to say, I might go to midnight. But I'm not going to do it just so I can ramble on about nothing. Okay? So there's an important point to all of this. They brought lamps for 2 reasons. 1, how are they going to travel on the road?
Lamps.
2, they're going to be upstairs and they don't have a light outside. How are they going to see?
Gotta have a lot.
Okay, thank you very much. So these lamps are going to be dual purpose right here. They broke bread. This is going to be a community meal. And one of the reasons you did that is a lot of these people didn't have food. You had a lot of poor people. This is like an ancient potluck, but for the slaves, one scholarly source said this would have been the only time they had a tasty meal all week. Okay, it was kind of distributing the wealth among the poor citizens. And they also, and here's an important part, they probably had the Lord's Supper at the beginning and the end of the meal, or once during the meal. This is probably something they began to do based on 1 Corinthians 11, one way or another. But the key thing here isn't eating, it's going to be the teaching, because they gathered to receive teaching with an emphasis. The description on instructed believers could refer to either a long sermon lecture or a conversation dialogue. But many believe, and I think so as well, Paul has just written the book of Romans. Has anybody read the book of Romans before?
Yes.
There's a lot of theology there, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you tried to explain the book of Romans, you'd be the commandment anyway. Okay? So more than likely what he's doing here is he's going over all the theology he has just outlined in the book of Romans, and he's only got 1 day to do it in. I couldn't teach you the book of Romans in 6 days. But he wrote it, so he's a little ahead of me on it. Yeah,
invitation dinner.
Yes, exactly. So what he's doing here is he's breaking down the theology more like the book of Romans, and this is going to take place upstairs in a 3-story building, which it could be a rich person, but more than likely we're looking at a tenant building. Tenant building would have been, you'd have had a work office, craftsman center on the bottom, and you would have had apartments going up. And so this is probably more along the line of an apartment building, something along those lines right there, okay? Keep in mind, it's at night. We are all jam-packed into one room. It's stuffy. I've had a long day of work. What am I kind of, if it was really dark in here, you know, and you know.
I'm taking a nap.
Thank you. And you fit right in right here. But there's a moral to that story. We'll see that. So we'll go read verse 9 for us.
And a young man named Eutychus, sitting at the window, sank into a deep sleep as Paul talked still longer. And being overcome by sleep, he fell down from a 3rd story and was taken up dead.
Oh, yes. That should be a lesson. I'm going to get a tattoo this on Gene Brown. Just kidding, Gene. Anyway, right here, verse 9, we got this young man named Eutychus, okay? Now, young man here could refer between 18 and 30, but when we use it in verse 12, it uses a term that refers to a kid that's 8 to 14. And most go with the younger age here. His name is Eutychus. Does anybody want to guess what that name means? Because this is his real name, by the way, not a nickname. Anybody want to guess what the name Eutychus means?
Eunuch?
No, but good guess.
Eucalyptus?
No. It means fortunate or lucky one.
Oh.
Yeah, so
Oh, you
lucky
even
one.
told me that.
Lucky one falls asleep during the sermon and does what? Falls out and dies. And this is his real name, by the way. So he's sitting in the window. They rarely had glass back then. And keep in mind, it's stuffy, it's hot. That's going to be your coolest place in the room. It's kind of dark. You've been working all day. And Paul begins to talk. And the imperfect tense means he keeps on speaking. It doesn't mean he's boring or it doesn't mean he's rambling. But it means he's giving a long, detailed exposition of Scripture. Okay? And he does this thing where he goes, and finally, and we're almost there, and finally, one more thing, oh yeah, and finally, and he's doing this over, and he keeps going, he's making detailed exegetical points, so he's making a reason with all this, and as he's doing this, this kid is being overcome by sleep, which means he's sunk into a deep sleep, which is a passive tense, which means the force of the sleep is stronger than his will, and it pulls him down into profound slumber. He's fighting it. He's fighting it. He's fighting it, and he's progressively sinking, and he's fighting it, and he's progressively sinking, and he's fighting it, and finally he's sound asleep, and he's snoring. Now, for those of you that think that's okay, in Qumran and other circles, if you fell asleep during the sermon, you were expelled for 30 days. And you were made an example of. You did not fall asleep at that time period. It was huge, okay? And this is one of the reasons why. And so then as he falls asleep into that deep sleep, you know, all of a sudden you're just about to sleep and you twitch like that. Well, he says twitch just like that. And when he does that, what happens?
Wow.
Well, he falls 3 stories down to the pavement, hits it head first, and seems to break his neck. And all of a sudden everybody gets up, rushes out, finds him dead, and everyone learns a lesson that you don't fall asleep in sermons. The end. That's where I actually technically ended it, but that's okay. I'm going to finish it here. That was where I ended this one, but we will see here. Go ahead and read verse 10. Okay, we'll throw verse 10 in there for fun of it now.
But going down, Paul bent over him and embracing him said, "Do not be alarmed, for his soul is in him."
Okay, so Paul intervenes. They should have left this part out, in my opinion, still. Paul intervenes and they're narrated with 4 verbs here. He goes down from the 3rd floor down to the street. He gets on top of the lifeless body. He throws his arms around the boy. Then he speaks to the other believers, commands them not to be agitated, and guarantees them everything is going to be fine. Literally, he says life or his soul is in the boy, meaning Paul raises him from the dead, putting Paul in line with a pattern of a few other important prophets. Anybody know any of the prophets who raised the dead? Throw some names out there for me. Peter, Elijah, Elisha, Jesus. There you go. It puts Paul on that list as well. We're going to read one of them in a second. All raising the dead, demonstrating the life-giving power of God. People wonder what exactly he does here. We don't know, but it's very often compared to Elisha or something along those lines. And since this is the least known raising of the dead story and one of my favorites, just listen, and Jacinda's going to read you the Elisha raising the dead from 2 Kings 4, 32 to 37 to give you an idea of possibly what Paul does here. Go ahead and read that.
When Elisha came into the house, he saw the child lying dead on his bed. So he went in and shut the door behind the 2 of them and prayed to the Lord. Then he went up and lay on the child, putting his mouth on his mouth, his eyes on his eyes, and his hands on his hands.
Up close and personal. Okay, just keep that in mind. Mouth, eyes, hands. Keep going.
And he stretched himself upon him. The flesh of the child became warm. Then he got up again and walked once back and forth in the house, and went up and stretched himself upon him. The child sneezed 7 times, and the child opened his eyes. Then he summoned Gehazi and said, "Call this Shunammite." So he called her, and when she came to him, he said, "Pick up your son." She came and fell at his feet, bowing to the ground. Then she picked up her son and went out.
A lot of prayer, a lot of getting close and personal. It's possible Paul does this as well, but that's how Elisha does it, and he falls in the same line right here. And then Paul in Acts 20, verse 11 through 12, read Acts 20, 11 through 12 for us.
And going up and breaking bread and eating and conversing with them a long while, until daybreak, he departed. And they took the lad away alive and were very comforted. Okay,
so after he raises the dead, what does he do?
Eat.
He goes back upstairs and eats, and then does what? Keeps teaching. He just keeps on teaching. He just does not deter him. He keeps on teaching, and he does it in the Greek for a long time until dawn type idea, and then he's going to leave for a couple hours, maybe to get some sleep, and then he's going to leave Troas and head to Assos in verse 13. But the important thing here is If you think you get a pass from the sermon, the little dead boy, after he gets raised from the dead, you know what the text implies that he does? Goes back upstairs and listens to the rest of the sermon. So you do not get a pass from the sermon, even if you die in the process. That's the lesson of this story. Don't fall asleep, and if you do, and you die, you must still pay attention. And that is the lesson we get from this story. Any questions? It's that lesson I'm teaching in the story.
Hey,
Yes.
the guy's name really was Lucky.
I know it, and it's funny because you didn't know he's going to get risen from the dead, but he falls over and dies, but then he really is lucky. You know, people make that joke all the
lucky
time.
because Paul's
there, that's right, that's exactly right. He's really lucky, that's right, fortunate one. And that is funny, and that's his real name. It's not playing on nicknames or anything, that was his real name, so that's just how it works. Lord's got a sense of humor, put it that way, so that's part of it. All right, are there any questions on that? No questions. Well, that is good. We will pick back up next week. We will get into the Ephesian elders are going to meet Paul down the street, basically, and we're going to get into what all that means, and we will go from there. Any questions from there, let me know, and we will pick back up on Wednesday. All right, Brother Steve, close us out.
Heavenly Father, just thank you that we have time to come together to study your word in detail and to gain more knowledge about it so that we can be more knowledgeable, that we can defend our faith and speak boldly about what your promise is and how it's fulfilled and the history behind it. So Lord, be with us as this week comes up. Lead us and guide us. It's in your Son's name I pray. Amen.
Amen.